This is Silph Radio, a Pokemon-centered podcast. Every episode, we discuss a different aspect of the Pokemon universe, be that a person, place, or thing. It's usually nouns. I wonder if we've ever done an episode that's not a noun. Today, joining me for the third time on this show, he hosts a podcast of his own. It's called Amusement Sparks, and I highly recommend it. It's so much fun, and unlike our show, it's safe for the whole family. And I've been on there a couple times, so you're bound to like it. His name is
Andrew Spohn. Hello, thank you for that introduction. My wife thought we were going to be recording an entire Amusement Sparks episode on today's topic, which would be a little bit silly.
Oh man, that's fucking brilliant.
She's like, how are you going to do like a full hour and a half theme park designed based on this one specific family of Pokemon? I was like, that's crazy. We wouldn't go that far with it.
Man, but we should. Now you make me want to. Today's topic is the Nidoran family, and wow, an entire theme park based on Nidoran. Well, that was an episode of the anime, wasn't it? Where they got lost on that island.
Right. Was that the island of giant Pokemon? Is that the one?
Yes, oh my god, that's why in researching this episode, I'm like, really? Nidoking and Nidoqueen are only like 4 feet tall? That's fucking why. That's why we all think they're giants. And they also look kind of like Baragon, but still.
True, and they were in the manga. I think there was a giant-sized version of at least Nidoking in Viridian Forest at one point.
Yeah.
They definitely look really huge and intimidating, both the Nidoking and Nidoqueen. But they're not that huge. They're not gigantic.
Well, I mean, shit, if you go by the original Pocket Monsters manga, the one with the Blockhead Clefairy, that Viridian Forest has got all sorts of shit. There's a 3-eyed Persian, a Mewtwo.
Whoa. That's weird. And Pokemon Adventures has some crazy stuff in there. There's Dragonairs and Mew and all kinds of stuff. Viridian Forest was a magical place in the manga, I suppose.
Well, the first issue of that Blockhead Clefairy manga came out before the games were even released. So a lot of that was probably drawn early in production. Like Persian probably originally had a third eye instead of like a gem on his forehead.
Wow, that's kind of cool to think about. Huh.
And Nidoran, or Nidorino, was actually, it was either a Nidorino or a Nidorina, and it talked. It spoke, excuse me. Talked is not a word. Jesus Christ, Nathan. It talked at Red. Anyway.
Speaking of parts of speech, though, I do think you guys did an episode on battling, and that is a verb, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh.
If you're thinking about, person, place, thing.
Well, it was the science and politics of Pokemon battling.
Dang.
But you're the teacher, Andrew. What's the subject of that sentence? Is it science, politics, or Pokemon battling?
I have no clue.
Science and politics. I think it's Pokemon battling, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess. That's the focus of the sentence, at least from I don't know. I don't know many details about how grammar works, but I kind of understand the point of it. and it seems like the point of that sentence is something about Pokemon, right? So
yeah. Absolutely, you're right. Okay, there's the verb, battling. There we go. Or was it battles? Because a battle is a noun.
I don't know. We'll have to check the episode titles.
Anyway.
Hard to say.
Today.
And that's it for another episode of Grammar Talk within the Pokemon world.
We're talking about Nidoran today. And interesting enough, needles that's a noun, but ran is a verb.
Don't run with needles, kids.
Don't run with needles. If you take anything away from this episode, don't run with needles.
Absolutely.
Make it so.
Very true. Cool. So these are some of the first Pokemon that I remember coming across in the Red and Blue games, the first games I ever played. And in fact, when you first turn on your Game Boy, the first Pokemon you see is Nidorino, right? On the...
Oh, yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
When it's fighting Gengar? And then
fighting Gengar, yeah.
Does Professor Oak have a Nidoran also? You know how a little Pokemon pops up next to Professor Oak? I think it's a Nidoran, isn't it?
Oh, you could be correct. I think so. It might be a Nidoran male, potentially. I'm not exactly sure. We'd have to research that, but I do think you're right.
I think so. It pops... I don't know. I can see it in my mind, although that might be a false memory. But
yeah,
what they stick out to me as is sort of one of the earliest Pokemon that you encounter that's not a Pokemon you were already maybe that familiar with when you first picked up Red and Blue, if you were a youngin' back when they came out, like us. And you would go to Viridian City, and you're supposed to travel to the east, but if you travel to the west, you can encounter some Nidoran, and then you get up to Indigo Plateau, and you can't go that far.
Yeah, if you try starting off going by straight to Indigo Plateau, it's not going to work out so good. But you do get rewarded for that. You get to encounter the Nidorans. And I remember this being like a really cool thing because, I mean, of course, the starter Pokemon are fantastic. Like, everyone's really excited about that. But that's kind of like a canned experience. Like, they're not within the world of Pokemon in a way. Like, they're not in the wild. They're, they've already been captured. They've already been tamed. So when you go out in the wild, it's like there's a bunch of birds. There's a bunch of, like, rats. It's like, this is kind of like real life if you go wandering through the tall grass. Until you get to, like, the Nidorinos, or, Nidoran male, Nidoran female. It's like, what even are these? They kind of look like rabbits, but they're like poisonous, and they have like, I don't know, like I couldn't figure out what that is. It's like one of the first like really magical looking Pokemon aside from the starters.
They are an enigma of a Pokemon, and this is the first time in a long time that I've chosen the topic for the episode. A lot of times, mostly I will give the guest an opportunity to, if not directly choose the topic, at least give me a way to direct them to the topic.
Yeah, and, right.
To narrow it down. But this is the first time that I was just flat out like, I want somebody to do a Nidoran episode with me. Specifically because of what you just said. I was like, what are they? I mean, the only thing I could wrap my head around at first was like, okay, well, they evolve with the Moonstone, and I know that rabbits are associated with the moon in a lot of cultures. All over the world. A lot of people say that you can see a man in the moon if you look at the moon. I've never been able to see the man in the moon, but I see the rabbit. I can see the shape that's supposed to be a hare or a rabbit.
Right. I agree. I mean, I've seen like a face on Mars before, but I've never seen one on our
in
moon,
person.
Really. I mean, no, photographs, of course.
Well, that's not real, though.
Oh, yeah, it's just shadows, but...
Tricks of the light, yeah. Oh, man,
yeah,
that captivated
cool,
my imagination as a kid, though.
Oh yeah,
man.
dude. Like, that kind of, like, ancient aliens part of my brain was so satisfied. Like, I still have a picture of that on my phone.
Oh, I don't need the picture of it. I could reproduce it verbatim. I know verbatim implies the words, but I don't know what the word is. But anyway.
Oh, no, verbatim...
A picture's worth 1,000 words, so, okay? Just deal with it.
That's true. Thank you.
Verbatim.
Awesome. Verbatim.
No, they always struck me as a really weird enigma of a Pokemon, and I was determined, as the Pokemon franchise gets older, a lot of the original 150 Pokemon there have been news articles, for Christ's sakes, on like Kotaku, or even like BuzzFeed or something that's like, hey, did you ever know that Poliwhirl looks like this because you can see a tadpole's intestines? What? I didn't know that. There's all sorts of little things like that have popped up. But Nidoran was one in particular that I'm like, well, what the fuck is there a poison bunny rabbit with horns doing in Kanto?
We still don't know.
So I took it upon my shoulders. I did this for you guys, the listeners, and I put in the work to figure out what the fuck is up with Nidoran. And I think this is a Silph Radio original. I think we're going to get to the bottom of Nidoran today. Or at least past the middle.
Hard-hitting investigative journalism, folks. Here it is.
What really matters, okay?
Right.
You know what? People are sick of hearing about Russia and Nazis, and we're going to talk about poison bunny rabbits, okay?
Wonderful. Yeah. So, I mean, it's definitely an interesting Pokemon. It's one of the first poison type that you encounter.
Well, Viridian Forest is after Viridian City. Yes, it is. You're right.
Yeah.
Unless you don't
before you get to like Weedles and...
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you're right, because it is kind of an optional path. You don't have to encounter them until you get to Safari Zone, really, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, wow. Right, for such a basic, low-numbered Pokemon in the Pokédex,
And to me, like, they're so... That's definitely one of the first Pokemon I remember from, like, my first day of playing, like, sitting in my grandparents', like, breakfast nook. Like, I remember Nidoran. It was, like, a magical thing. But I guess some people didn't experience it day one. Like, you could have just gone to the right.
Yeah,
Man,
a lot
sliding
of people
doors.
probably did. Like, it's hard for me to put myself in the shoes of an RPG player that doesn't investigate every single corner available to them before they move on. But, yeah, They're known as the Poison Pin Pokemon. Obviously, as you said, they're type Poison. Later, as they evolve, they acquire the Ground type. But the main gimmick, if you will, about this Pokemon that sticks out is that there's a female and a male version. Before the Pokemon franchise had different genders, or more accurately sexes, for the Pokemon, this was the only one. And they're actually separated as two different species, the male Nidoran and the female Nidoran. They don't just split off into a different evolutionary line as they probably would if they were created nowadays. There would probably just be cosmetic differences and they would branch off in evolution, but they wouldn't have a different Pokedex number. So they're the only Pokemon, to my knowledge, that has a different Pokedex number just because of their sex, which is interesting.
I think maybe Illumise or Illumise or whatever that guy's called with Volbeat, I think they might be technically the same species.
Wait, no,
but
they're different. They're two different numbers. Okay.
They're different numbers, though, right? But, I mean, I think that technically you could say they're the same Pokemon. You know what I mean? Just the male version, the female version.
You're right.
But it is a super weird thing, and they're the only Pokemon that has the Mars or Venus symbol in their name.
Yeah, they have the same exact name, as opposed to Illumise and Volbeat or Nickelback or whatever its name is.
And why didn't they just give the base forms two different names? You know what I mean? I don't understand that. It's really weird.
They weren't. I like it. It throws a wrench in the gears now because it's weird to have that as this outlander or outsider, whereas outlier was the word I was looking for, verbatim. And as this outlier, as this outlier, that its gender differences are actually how persecuted do you think Nidoran feels? I'm not a separate Pokemon, Mom.
Right, if you have to self-identify your gender every time you say your name, or that's kind of a weird thing.
Nidoran, usually male, Nidoran, male.
Typically, gender is something that you kind of assume about something. So in a way, it's kind of progressive. It's like at my school where I teach, we're very progressive, and we ask, every student, what are your preferred pronouns the first day of school? But most schools, you can just assume people based on what they look like. But these two Pokemon are kind of different.
You're so much more like Professor Oak than I thought. You literally start their school year with, "Are you a boy or a girl?"
Yeah, exactly. We're I don't want to assume anything here.
Well, no, the question's more open ended than that.
And it's not that we're super forgetful. So I was gonna say with the naming convention, it's kind of shaped like a V. They have the exact same name at the beginning, just separated by the male or female symbol. But then from then on, each evolution has its own progression. So they only share a name with the first, the basic Pokemon.
But their names. Let's just talk about. Let's get it out of the way while they're talking about their names. I can't talk today, verbatim. Their names, almost every Pokemon. Name is so layered that it's fucking ridiculous. So, first and foremost, Nido is sort of like the Japanese romanization of needle. So, if you were to pronounce the word needle in Japanese, it would either be Nidoru or it would be Nido, which both sound like Nidoran. It would either be Nidoru or Nido. So, Nido, needle, they have poison pins. They're the poison pin Pokemon. Nido also means two times in Japanese. There's two different versions of it.
Yep, and then they also have two evolutions. There's Nidorina and then Nidoqueen.
Exactly, yeah.
That could be one interpretation of the two times thing. Or they also use a couple attacks that repeat multiple times.
Oh, wow, they don't double Poison Sting or what's that sting move that they Pin Missile or I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. Fury Swipe, or not Fury. Yeah, Fury Swipes, Double Kick. They have a couple attacks that hit multiple times.
I don't like getting old, man. I'm supposed to be the guy that knows everything about Pokemon, and I lost that title so long ago.
I thought that attack name was going to pop in my head once I started saying that sentence, and it just didn't.
No,
what is that attack called?
Once you started saying that sentence, I thought it was going to pop into my head.
It's not. I guess weird. We could look it up.
The second half of their name is Ran, which is actually the word for orchids in Japan. The flowers, which can either be blue or purple, which the male Nidorans are purple or pink and the females are blue. Also, it's called Nidoran pretty much everywhere except China. But in Chinese, lan means orchid, which is they're called Nidolan in China. So they're named after orchids everywhere.
That's really interesting because I do know that orchids can be poisonous to certain kinds of animals. So it's a beautiful flower, you know, it's got like a nice color to it, but they can be poisonous. They're not poisonous to humans. That's why we are not scared of them, but certain animals, if they knew, would be scared of them because of the poison.
And maybe they do because of the colors. That's why a lot of those things have those colors to protect themselves so that the animals know, oh, I remember that the bright blue flower is something I don't want to eat.
True. And speaking of colors, I this just came to me thinking of the kind of pink versus blue. It goes back to kind of our societal depictions of sex. Like, you know, pink is supposed to mean female to our modern, you know, audience, and blue means male, and they're reversed, which is the way that those colors, I guess, were originally used, like a couple hundred years ago.
Absolutely.
Pink was the color for baby
I think
boys.
less than I think about 100 years ago. Like, it's crazy.
Could be. And it just totally flip-flopped. Like, they're like, no, wait, pink is for girls, blue is for boys. You got it all wrong.
But, you got it all wrong. Can you believe back in the past, people thought pink was a boy's color? They thought the earth was flat and pink was for boys.
And so maybe the way that we came to that, like pink is for boys, came from humanity's, you know, coexistence with the Nidoran family.
Oh, okay.
You know, we're like, well, this is the male version of this creature is pink, so pink is for boy humans as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that pink-blue distinction is so clear in Japan either.
True.
It is interesting. The shinies also are flip-flopped, which I think is cool.
Yeah, their colors are reversed.
Another thing with the Nido part of their names, apparently, like, the cells that a jellyfish has, which, like, sting people, are actually known as, I don't know how to pronounce this word, but it's spelled the letter C, Nido, so like, it's nidocyte, but with a C at the beginning, so like sneedocyte or something.
Huh, but I bet the C is silent.
It might be.
Just picturing that word. Huh.
Nidocyte. Yeah, I don't know.
Again, tied into poison. So this name is layered. There's a lot of possible references for where that part comes from.
Yeah, and I'm sure this went right over your head. Like, I bet you never even noticed that, like, king is like a masculine suffix, and queen is like a feminine suffix. Then you extend that to Nidorino and Nidorina.
See, that's the part I noticed from Spanish class. Like, Nidorina is the female version of the word. Nidorino is the male version. But
no, king actually dates back to, like, English, like, royal ancestry and stuff. Like, yeah, dude.
You really did your research for this one.
Hey.
There is something kind of interesting. I've heard a kind of interpretation where these Pokemon might have been inspired by like a rhinoceros, and that's where the Reno part comes from.
Totally.
That was just a theory I heard, which we'll probably get more into the rhinoceros angle in a bit, but
Absolutely.
That is another thing that could fit in there as one of the inspirations.
I mean, it blows my mind that they're able to make these names. Like, I gotta believe that at least 25% of the references in the names are coincidental, because as a writer, that just happens. Like, as a writer, I feel like there really are ideas that just express themselves. You're not expressing the idea. You're just the vessel it used to express itself. I don't mean that literally. Like, I don't want you to think I think there's some weird metaphysical, like, idea being that's like, ooh, I'm gonna squeedle on down to this person's head. And no, but, like, things crystallize into existence the same way that, like, a seed turns into a tree, I think. And, like,
wow,
I'm getting way deep with this, but, like, I do think that, like for maybe the nidocyte being the thing that stings people in jellyfish was something they didn't intend. That's just a happy accident. But there's no way that all these things are happy accidents. That it has rhino in there, the masculine and feminine suffixes, the Japanese words, the orchid, all of that. Like, it's beautiful how they're able to, like, I wonder sometimes if there were, like, there had to have been, like, during the production and development of it, maybe somebody was making a rabbit Pokemon and someone was making a rhino Pokemon, and they were like, you know what? We could combine these together, you know, and, like, it somehow, I don't know. I love it.
It does seem to be kind of in between there somewhere, because it's, if you look at the final forms, those are not rabbits. Something else is going on there.
No, they're not rabbits, but they do still have a few rabbit features. They have two toes. They have the ears.
True.
They're
and they're not
poison.
rhinoceri.
Rhinoceri, I think that's right. Rhinoceros.
Oh, that doesn't seem right. Man, the grammar keeps coming back to get us in this one.
Well, the Three Stooges say rhinoceroses because I don't want rhinoceroses. I only want the hippopotamuses or something. I don't know.
Generally, you can pronounce it with the us's or the I version, and I prefer to go with the more annoying one and just say octopuses, because it's technically correct. It's just not what mainstream wants you to use. So
what's annoying about it, though, is we're talking about the quadruped mammal with tough skin and a horn on its snout, and he keeps saying octopuses. And I'm like, the plural of rhinoceros is either rhinoceri or rhinoceroses.
It's not octopi, you're right. I was way off. I'm sorry. That's great.
So I think we've unpacked its name enough. Let's talk about the actual Pokemon, shall we?
Okay. I'm down.
The males are said to be about 1 foot 8 inches high, whereas the females are about 1 foot 4. Also, respectively, 19.8 pounds for males, 15.4 pounds for females. That's 9 kilograms and 7 kilograms. So the males are bigger than the females, which is actually counterintuitive for rabbits.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I think is similar with rabbits is I guess rabbits are supposedly, like, male rabbits have blockier features, supposedly, and female rabbits are more rounded, which is totally evident as they, even in their lower stages, but especially as they evolve. Also, in rabbits, the differences between male and female rabbits don't become evident until they get older.
Wow.
Fucking brilliant.
That ties in. That's cool.
Right? Like, that's...
Yeah.
You can tell the difference between a male and female Nidoran, but they both have the same name. They don't branch off until they get older, which is just... I fucking love Pokemon.
Yeah, it is so cool how that kind of stuff, like... And it's just kind of like what you're saying with the name, where I'm sure parts of it were, like, designed from scratch, and then other things just kind of came with it, like the snowball effect, and they kept coming up with, like, additional references that the name could be, or they could be things that fans, found years later. It's just really cool to see all of that kind of come together to create this, like, multi-dimensional being. It's really cool.
Did you ever play with a Nidoran? Was that ever a staple on your team? I mean, I'm sure you've trained one once or twice.
At the beginning, absolutely. Yeah, and I've always been closely attached to the Moonstone for some reason, so I've always gravitated towards the Pokemon that evolve with the Moonstone, especially in the first generation or two of the games. But yeah, I did use a Nidoran. Nidoran male. I don't know. I like the design a little bit more.
I agree.
Kind of like longer ears and... Yeah, and I had him in the trading card game as well, the male version. I thought the art was really cool on that card. So
I mean, your motivations are clearly misogynist and misguided, but I agree purely from an aesthetic perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I mean, any chance I can to help somebody else like self-improve, I kid, of
Wonderful. Sure.
Sure. So, I know this is a little scattershot, but I gotta wonder, is there, like, a specific reason, like, in canon, like, if we're gonna fanwank this, is there something that makes them two different species of Pokemon as opposed to being two just, I know the real reason is that back then they didn't have different genders for Pokemon, and now they do. And the creators probably would have done it differently had they had every Pokemon having gender back then. But...
Right.
That's not how Star Wars fans treat, like, oh, well, obviously the reason he says Carrie is because the actress was named Carrie Fisher. No, they pick up the ball and they're like, oh, Luke had a dream that he met some girl named Carrie or something. I made that one up. But you know what I mean? They figure out a way to make the mistakes make sense in canon. The parsecs is a great example. Like, the Star Wars fans have figured out how Han Solo... because he spoke about parsecs as if it was an amount of time.
Right, but it's a distance.
Yeah, but they, patched that together with their just expert fan-wanking and dedication to the franchise. So, is there a reason in universe that Nidorans are two different species? And is that reason, actually, I just was thinking, is it just that, again, that the Pokedex was put together by children?
It could be, or that the Pokedex was created by Professor Oak, who lives near Route 22, and that might have been one of the only gender differences between Pokemon that they saw. Actually, in that whole region, they are the only ones that are different by gender, so that was the only example they had.
Pikachus have a different shaped tail, and there are minor differences, but they're the only one with a major difference.
Right.
Yeah, or maybe, now that I'm thinking about it, the Pokedex entry for Nidoqueen does mention that it has cooties, so, yeah.
I bet that originally... So, maybe in like the predecessors to the modern Pokedex, which was probably just, you know, some drawings with like a name at the bottom. So they had a picture of Nidoran, and then that's just one Pokemon. They weren't separated by gender because they look, you know, close enough, where the rest of it could just be kind of individuality, having those small differences in like ear length and color. It's like, whatever, that's a Nidoran. But you know that Nidoking is different than Nidoqueen. So you're like, okay, there's a total of 5 Pokemon here. We've got Nidoran, Nidorino, Nidorina, Nidoking, Nidoqueen, and that's it. And then eventually when you get to the kind of more standardized form of using a Pokedex, you're like, well, no, we can't have one Pokemon that splits off like that. It's going to throw off our number scheme. Like, we need to have the male classification and then the female classification. So that could be kind of the origin of that. Like, maybe they technically are the same Pokemon, and that's why they have the same name. Like, from a scientific perspective, maybe they're the same Pokemon, just different genders. But yeah, they just wanted to make the number scheme of the Pokedex make more sense. So they're like, okay, you know, we got to do the male path and the female path like separate.
Yeah, I like that, and the fact that Professor Oak invented it, I love that idea too, because it's so close.
Mm-hmm.
There is interesting aspects to the sex politics of Nidorans, if you will, because well, for one, obviously, if you breed a Nidoran with a Ditto, you can get Nidoran babies, but the baby doesn't have to be a Nidoran male, or like it can be a Nidoran female or a Nidoran male.
Yeah, exactly. The gender, the sex that they're born with is the sex or gender of that Pokemon. It's like a Nidoking could have a baby who eventually becomes a Nidoqueen.
They can't mate past their base evolutionary stages. So they're the only Pokemon that can't mate that can mate earlier but can't once they evolve.
I think Nidoking still can. Is that right?
No, I'm pretty sure that it's just the Nidorans.
Because I know that's an issue with Nidoqueen, like that is a really strange thing that she like can't reproduce. She becomes a member of the like unknown egg group. But from my research, at least in my memory, the Nidoking can still reproduce, which is weird.
I may be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. You could look it up, or the fans could look it up. I don't feel like it. But
I'm going to look it up because I'm curious. I'm very interested now.
And not only that, while you're looking that up, it's also the only case in which a Pokemon can mate with a Ditto, and they can have a child that is a completely different Pokedex numbered Pokemon. Like, that never happens. And that might be the reason in the programming that it doesn't happen after their lower stages. But I think that's interesting too, because whether it's intentional or not, like synchronicity, it matched up. Like, rabbits mate so fast, like crazy. Your rabbit has babies. The babies are babies having babies. Like, oh my God! Don't tell Bill Cosby about the rabbits. He'll go crazy. Like, he might even. Never mind. I started with one Bill Cosby joke, and it became a different Bill Cosby joke, and then I was like, abort. No,
wow.
No, hold on. Never mind. Never mind. I didn't say anything about Bill Cosby. So
no, not at all.
No.
Good Lord. But yeah, so the breeding situation is definitely strange here. And one like fan theory that I've seen is that in captivity they're having a huge problem getting rhinoceri to reproduce in captivity. It's like it doesn't happen, and the male reproductive system for a rhino is totally fine, but I guess there's like a lot of intricacies, and like it's very common to have difficulties with the female reproductive system. So that's the fan theory I had heard for why the Nidoqueen cannot reproduce but Nidoking can, is it's like, well, once you've captured the Pokemon, sometimes that messes things up, just like putting them in a zoo. Like, maybe they're not going to reproduce as much as they would in the wild because, you know, they're in your pocket. Like, it's a little awkward in here.
Wow. It's a little awkward in here. Is that me in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?
Yeah.
So no, that's phenomenal though. That's again, like, I don't think that was intended, but I like, at least not by the creators themselves, but like that fits so well into the into the mythology of the Nidoran. Like, that's amazing, into the influences. And
it's a really fascinating fan theory, even if, I mean, and it might be true, you know, maybe that's what they were going for. Like, maybe someone had this really strange idea that was keeping them up late at night making the original Pokemon. They're like, I want to have this idea where this rhinoceros cannot breed in captivity, and it falls on the female. Like, that's a really, like, stressful, like, very powerful storytelling thing. It's not like they get into that in the story, but they're like, let's have a Pokemon that's kind of inspired by that, like, tragedy or that, you know, that consequence of captivity. It's an interesting statement. So I don't know. That's possible that it was intentional. I doubt it, but I like the idea of that being something that someone was really into.
Hey, like, yeah, I wouldn't bank on it, but there's so much in the original Red and Blue games that's so subtle but obviously intended that, like, I wouldn't say I wouldn't doubt it. I would doubt it, but I wouldn't, like, write it off, you know?
Yeah.
That is, wow. I love that.
It's really interesting. And there's, like, other consequences of that. Like, for example, Nidorina and Nidoqueen are the only, like, non-legendary, non-baby Pokemon that are in the unknown egg group. Like, their just reproductive system is different. And it makes sense why, from a gameplay perspective, you'd want to limit the way that legendaries can breed and that babies can't breed. Like, that's a little bit weird. They haven't developed enough. But those two full-grown Pokemon, teenage age, I guess, with Nidorina, and then full-grown Nidoqueen, they're in an unknown egg group. They're the only non-legendary Pokemon that's in non-baby Pokemon that's like that. It's very strange.
That is really strange.
Isn't that weird?
It is. Yeah.
Especially if they're the same species as Nidoking, which is in a different egg group.
And Nidoking is definitely in a different egg group?
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. That has to be intentional then.
I think so. It's weird. And I mean, there weren't eggs. You know, they created these Pokemon in Generation 1 with the male and female thing. And then when they got around to giving genders and, like, giving sexes, I guess, to every Pokemon in Generation 2 and adding the whole egg mechanic, it's like, well...
So that somehow, like, that's why it's fascinating to me, because they came up with an idea that both represents how rabbits breed so quickly in their youthful stages, and also how rhinos don't breed in captivity, and somehow...
And maybe that's the combination of a rabbit and a rhino. Like, that kind of makes sense.
But then there's so many other things that are, like, so emblematic of rabbits, and things that are emblematic of rhinos, and the moon and poison, and we're gonna get all into that. Like,
I mean, there's also, like, the whole, like, dinosaur kind of angle. Like, I always saw Nidorino as, like, a cool dinosaur looking thing. It's weird. And by the way, it is in the monster and field egg group for Nidorino and Nidoking.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a weird little factoid.
They split off, I believe, according to the Pokedex, as they evolve. Like, Nidorino and Nidoking become solitary, aggressive creatures that don't want anything to do with anybody else, whereas the Nidorinas and Nidoqueens develop close familial bonds and actually raise the young Nidorans. So, like, even the male Nidorans. And that's something that reflects rhino culture. Fuck it. Animals can have culture. That's something that represents rhinoceros culture as well. Like, the male rhinoceri, or octopi, as you might say, are very solitary and very territorial and aggressive. But the female rhinoceri, they take care of the families. They raise the male Nidorans. And I imagine the male ones eventually leave and just go live on their own, and the female ones stay there within their group.
It is very... interesting, because I mean that totally makes sense from like a like Animal Planet, you know, documentary kind of standpoint, that they're going to have different behaviors kind of based on their sex and their role in the community or the culture. So that's fitting. That makes sense. I'm with that. Yeah. Have you kind of noticed that their posture kind of changes? Like, both Nidoran are definitely on all fours, and then by the time they get to Nidoking and Nidoqueen, they're on their hind legs, walking around kind of in a humanoid kind of, you know, it's almost like they're evolving. Like, that's kind of an interesting thing.
It's exactly like they're evolving, only the word means something totally different here.
True. They're not only evolving in the way they mean, like, metamorphosizing, like they say in Pokemon, but actually evolving, like walking, you know, becoming bipedal and things like that. Oh, dude. Wow, this just popped in my head. So the reason why humans have such a long pregnancy compared to a lot of other mammals is because we walk on our hind legs. Our hips have to be just a certain way such that our birth canals are really narrow. So we have to like have the baby come out and like it's not developed and it's just like not ready to walk around and take care of itself, whereas a deer just plops out, hits the ground, and starts like walking around and eating and stuff.
Well, it's also because we have to get the baby out before the head is too big and
too big to come out,
that it would just kill the parent or kill the baby.
So when Nidoqueen, you know, steps onto her hind legs, like maybe that's when she stops being able to like reproduce.
I guess.
Maybe
you really hung up on this like Pokemon sex thing, Andrew. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, that just popped in my head when I was thinking of them like leaning back, because I was picturing a lot of the trading card game art. I can picture Nidorina standing on her hind legs, but not Nidorino. I would never see him like on his hind legs at all. So it's kind of interesting.
You're right.
You know what I mean? I feel like the posture starts to change earlier in life for the females.
Oh, I didn't even... You were saying that, and I was just thinking Nidoqueen this whole time. But you're right.
Oh, yeah.
You're totally right. And it's interesting, too, as Nidoqueen evolves, it specifically says that she has scales. And I think it's very possible that so does Nidoking. But that's weird, too, because these are mammalian creatures. They're very clearly inspired by a rabbit and a rhinoceros, and if you watch carefully, like in the anime or in mangas, like they do have hair. Like you might look at a Nidoran and think it's more like a lizard and it has smooth skin with no hair. At best, they're like, or like at least or whatever, they're like a rhino that has very, you know, like smooth, rough skin, but also little hairs. But like in their lower stages, it definitely seems like they're covered with fur like a rabbit would be. You can see it bristle at certain points. And as they become bigger, like you said, they become more like dinosaurs or reptiles, or they look like kaiju. Like they're very inspired by kaiju,
almost like
giant monsters.
Gorilla-like in their like chest and like stomach regions. It's kind of strange. Like they become more humanoid.
And there's a classification of animal called synapsids, which are basically some like halfway between reptile and mammal. And I don't think any of them exist nowadays. They're probably like that classification of animal is probably extinct. But if you know what a Dimetrodon was, it's the you would probably know it as a dinosaur, but it's not a dinosaur. It's a synapsid, and it's the little thing that it looks like a lizard. It hugs the ground while it walks, and it's got a big sail like a Spinosaurus on its back. And those things are actually half mammal, half reptile. They're synapsids. And there's other quote-unquote dinosaurs that were actually synapsids too. And it's really interesting that it almost seems to draw that into its inspirations as well.
Wow, that is crazy.
And I haven't even touched upon my favorite inspirations for Nidoran yet. Like, I'm saving that shit for the end. So keep listening,
It's
guys.
exciting. I had never heard of synapsids before. I just pulled up the Wikipedia article, and synapsid in Greek means fused arch, and it's synonymous, with theropsids, which is Greek for beast face.
Oh, okay. Beast face was my rap name in high school.
You know, beast-faced monsters. Like, what does that mean, beast-faced? Very strange. That's a really cool classification of animal, though. I'm definitely going to read the rest of this Wikipedia article.
You gotta love those beast-faced animals. Sorry.
Yeah, you freaking beast face. Aren't they all beast faced? Like, all beasts are beast faced, right? It'd be weird if they were human faced. Yikes.
That is scary. You ever see the game Seaman?
Yes, I have, with
Leonard
Nimoy. Yikes. Yeah, that's a weird thing. Cool. While we have a little pause here, I've been researching the attacks of the Nidoran family, and I think the one we were trying to say earlier that's like a double hit attack or multiple hit was either double kick or fury swipes. And then there were some other ones where I was like, you could say this is kind of an attack that kind of references the nature of the monster. It's not like that's a normal thing to do, but sometimes I like to look at the move list that a Pokemon has and be like, that one kind of fits. It's like fitting with the theme of that Pokemon. Like double team or like double edge, because they have the like split thing, or like reflect or mimic. It's like there's kind of like a duality there. Like,
and actually, I'm surprised I didn't think of this earlier. I watched an episode of the anime earlier.
Thank you.
And I watched an episode that was about these two people, a boy and a girl, who each had a Nidoran. The girl had a girl Nidoran, the boy had a boy Nidoran, and the Nidorans were in love, but the two trainers hated each other, and they were neighbors.
Oh,
and
shoot.
There's a moment at the end of the episode, because of course they get their shit together, and they're like, all right, we're cool now. And they have to fight off Team Rocket. And when they're shouting orders to their Nidorans together,
Close
they're
proximity.
Nidoran double kick, and the Nidorans actually both kick with one leg just one time, but they are each kicking. And I remember thinking as I watched that's not what double kick is. That's a move that one Pokemon uses. If they're both using double kick, he should get kicked 4 times.
Right. And like I kind of like that, the different depictions of what that attack actually looks like. And I mean, I hate to be so like in love with Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue, but when you had those really limited animations for attacks, it was just like most normal type attacks would just be like, you kind of lunge to the right and then go back. It's like, oh, so it's all up to the imagination then, I guess. Just my interpretation of some attacks was so different, and then like watching the anime and reading the manga like all at the same time, it's like, what does this attack actually do? Like, what is Substitute, for example? Like, there's so many attacks like that. Like, the attacks themselves can be captivating. You know, you could almost do a full episode of this show on like certain few attacks. Like, there's a lot to be interpreted about such a tiny little detail. It's really interesting. Maybe it's extremely boring and I'm just a total nerd. Like,
I think
who
it's
knows?
both.
Yeah, probably. Thank you.
No, you're right. I mean, the anime I don't even think is consistent with itself, though. It's just like...
It's not. It's all over the place.
Whatever services the scene.
Very true.
So when you think of Nidoran, the major features are like, you know, it's poison type, its horns, which are said to either inject or secrete toxin. They actually say that it can extend its toxic spikes when it's angry. I think a porcupine also is a big influence to this, and maybe even like hamsters and guinea pigs and rodents like that. I feel like I remember reading somewhere that like the males and the females don't get along, although I don't know if I don't remember where I read that. But that was definitely something that happened when I had gerbils as a kid. They had a bunch of babies together. We thought we got 2 females. One of them was a male. And they had babies. We had to remove the father and get a whole new cage for him because he was a dick and he would just beat the shit out of the female gerbil for no reason. And one night we went out to a movie. I believe it was Flubber. It was that time period. And the Robin Williams one. Of course, I'm not that old.
Oh, classic, right?
And when we came back, the lids, like the screens on the top of the cages were like pushed aside. They were all in the cages and all accounted for. The female had a bloody nose. Like the male literally got out of the cage and went over to the other cage just to beef and then went back. And it was heartbreaking and horrible. But
yeah, that's messed up. That's like domestic abuse, man.
Again, that kind of works with this, like, even if I'm remembering falsely that they beef with each other, the female and male Nidorans, the male Nidorans are clearly aggressive and territorial, and they separate themselves from the rest of the pack. So, like, that works too. It's fascinating. But
it gels, yeah, you're right.
Besides thinking about the horns and the spikes and the poison, one thing that gets overlooked, actually, is the Nidoran's big ears. It's a rabbit, and it has big ears, but the Pokedex clearly says that it actually has very sensitive hearing, and I would imagine other senses associated with them. Don't rabbits use their ears for, like, all sorts of shit? That's why they, like, move them around and, like...
Yeah, I think so. They're like little antennae, like, detecting, you know, movement and stuff like that as a defense mechanism almost, or just to get more information about their surroundings.
Like, the slightest sound doesn't escape their notice. They can move their ears in any direction.
The male Nidorans, at least, can move their ears all around. I just remember seeing a distinction that the male Nidoran has like developed more muscles in its ears, so it can move them and like finely attune them. So
they're bigger and longer. It makes sense.
True. Maybe that's why they stay along with the females, is like as like an extra layer of defense. It's like we've got radar and the females don't, so we kind of stay with them at least while we're young to kind of help take care of the herd.
And it's interesting because There's something weird. It says that it flaps its ears like wings when it listens to really distant sounds, and that doesn't make any sense. Real rabbits definitely don't do that.
That's silly.
That's just silly. But
yeah.
It says that it scans its surroundings by raising its ears out of the grass. And I was just thinking about earlier, you were talking about the tall grass. And I wonder if tall grass is actually more of a thing in the Pokemon universe than we really think about it. We think about it, I think, mostly as like a gameplay mechanic. Like that's where you're going to have the random encounters. But maybe tall grass is actually a very common like topological feature. Is that the correct usage of that word?
Yeah, I think so.
That Pokemon actually use that to travel around undetected. Like maybe like how deers have deer paths, Pokemon travel through tall grass.
That makes sense, and you literally never see them walking around where there's not tall grass, so you can't disprove that theory.
And I always imagined that was just because the Pokemon MMO hadn't been made yet, and that they had to do it in a Game Boy friendly manner. Like I figured in real life in Viridian Forest, you'd see shit all over the place, not just in the tall grass. And same thing on Route 1, you wouldn't see it all over the place, but you'd wander and you'd see a Rattata or a Pidgey. You wouldn't just run into them in tall grass. I mean, they're birds, for Christ's sakes.
That's a good point.
But Pokemon are sentient beings, and maybe that's something that wild Pokemon use to escape detection by trainers. And so when trainers are marching through the tall grass, they're like, fuck you, get out of here, and they attack.
Yeah, and so maybe that's kind of like the middle ground between the humans and the Pokemon. And then if you notice, there's a lot of areas you can't get to because they're just trees there. It's like just a huge wall, a huge block of trees that are totally inaccessible. You can't go in there whatsoever. But maybe that's where all of the more rare or the more powerful Pokemon live, where they don't have to deal with humans.
That's where the Pokegods are.
Ooh,
that's where you get Venustoise.
Yeah, Pokeblue is in there, man.
Yeah.
You just have to use you have to fly to Viridian City and then fly back to Pallet Town 10 times, and then you use strength on the third tree from the left and
fourth tree.
Yeah, you can just walk right back there.
So when they evolved to Nidorino or Nidorina respectively, especially in Nidorino, the rhino influence really becomes clear. The stocky build, the way it's standing on all fours, is not at all like a bunny rabbit. It's like a rhinoceros. And something that's really interesting that I think is overlooked. Like, I don't know how this stuff gets overlooked when I was so obsessive as I was, like, as a kid to get every bit of information I could, and yet I forget things that are just flat out stated in the 2 sentences that are in the Pokedex. Like, the Nidorina, I guess female Nidorans aren't really, like, they don't like confrontation so much. They'd rather not fight, but they still have, like, their horns are just as poisonous. They're just not as big. But I guess Nidorina actually are more likely to attack with their claws and teeth, and their disorienting ultrasonic screeches.
Ugh.
So, like, that is something I never imagined. Like, I mean, I'm sure if I watched an episode of the anime, they probably go, Nidorina, 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 and it's really annoying, but that's probably just...
It's so grating. Yeah, the anime, a lot of the Pokemon are just sound so scary. So
exactly.
horrifying.
Every Pokemon knows offensive screech as a attack in the Pokemon anime. But I don't know. I just thought that was something interesting because it's something I don't think about at all when I think about Nido. I imagine they retain that ability as a Nidoqueen, or maybe not. Maybe it's more of a... I wanted to remember the word so I could sound smart. Thank you for
I was
not,
trying
like,
to help.
You got that, and you were like, I'm not going to interject. I'm not going to try to predict his word. Nobody does that. Everyone's always like, this word, that word, word. I wanted to sound smart. I can't remember the word.
I wanted to hear. Yeah, I was excited.
It was maybe it's a juvenile like feature. I don't know.
Sure.
Or maybe it's neoteny and it extends into adulthood. See, now I sound smart.
Wow, I don't even know what that means.
Verbatim.
You must be smart.
Neoteny is the retention of juvenile features into adulthood, like in biology.
Wow. Oh, cool.
Sort of like
That's
the
great.
axolotl, the amphibian that doesn't metamorphose.
Huh.
Mudkip.
Yes, exactly. That's kind of interesting. Like I never thought about them having like an ultrasonic like screech as like an attack. And I guess the male Nidoran would really dislike that because they're so sensitive of hearing, and then all the Nidorinos running around screaming, and that's when they evolve into Nidoran or Nidorino.
One of these days, Nidoran female. Bang, zoom to the Moonstone.
Aww. That's cute. Why a moonstone though? That's really interesting. I see the connection to a rabbit, but and I guess kaiju, like there's a kind of interesting cosmic connection there with the kind of Godzilla-esque proportions that these creatures have. But like why do they use a moonstone when they're like, is it because there's not a normal type stone?
I don't know. I think they're
not normal type. Sorry, I meant to say poison/ground, of course, but to me, they're not like one of the more traditional like elemental types. When
they came out with the fairy type, I remember thinking like, I think they should have done the moon type instead. And then I remember seeing that they were actually making a bunch of the Pokemon that evolved with the Moonstone fairy type. And I was like, see, I'm on board. I got exactly where they were going. I just felt like it should have been the moon type. I love the fairy type, by the way. I'm not hating on it. Those were just my initial thoughts. But you're right, because Nidoran is totally an outlier in the Moonstone type, too, because all the other creatures that use a Moonstone to evolve, to my memory, are like fairy type creatures, Not necessarily that type, but that type of creature,
They're moonish?
Moonish. They're fairy-ish.
Moon adjacent?
They're fae.
I see. Yeah, you're right. They're almost all either normal type or psychic.
Yeah.
Or fairy type, like we said. Yeah, that's really interesting.
And pink. Maybe it's just because the male Nidoran's pink.
That is possible, but the female is not. So, literally, they're all pink except for Nidorina, and Mana has pink but isn't fully pink. That's fascinating.
I mean, it's got to be the moon connection, like the rabbit to the moon. Like, again, that was the only thing I could make sense of at the beginning of this, being like Nidoran. This was months ago that I thought I want to do a Nidoran episode, but that was why, because I was like, there's got to be more to it than that, and there is. Yeah. Oh, there is. We're getting there.
Ooh.
Let's draw it out a little bit longer. Let's talk about their final stages a little bit. Nidoking and Nidoqueen.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing from like a biology standpoint, and I don't think this topic has been brought up yet on Silph Radio. So, how do Pokemon mommies feed Pokemon babies?
Oh,
because Nidoqueen has some kind of bra type appendages on her front area like a human would, and it's a little disturbing. I mean, I don't think rabbits have things like that.
Definitely not in their upper torso. They don't.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some things on DeviantArt, but I don't think in the biology textbooks it's quite like that.
Oh, the craziest thing, man, because I love collecting old the magazine Heavy Metal. Like in the 70s and 80s, it was like adult science fiction and fantasy. And it's just, to me, like such a cool piece of culture that especially reminds me of like the stuff that as a kid I would find and I'd be like, this exists? Like sci-fi for adults? What? And like, so whenever I find an old issue of Heavy Metal for a reasonable price, I always pick it up. And it is insane. Like how many furries there were out there, like in the 70s and 80s, that just, those poor furries, they had no idea that the internet existed and that they weren't alone, except for that one time that they picked up a Heavy Metal and they were maybe like, I wonder if this person thinks about fucking these guys. No, they do. In retrospect, like hindsight is 2020, reading old issues of Heavy Metal, half the people writing that were thinking, everyone writing that was thinking about fucking the people that they were drawing. And it's a little disturbing, no disrespect to, whatever your thing's your thing. But it's fascinating to me because it seems like something that came out of the internet, but it wasn't. It totally wasn't.
Yeah.
Like it existed and they just probably had no idea they weren't the only person in the universe. It's hilarious. Not hilarious in a condescending way. Just like, like, I don't know, like just, it's funny.
And it's almost a tragic thing. Like I think so many people from history were like really miserable people because they felt so alone in the world. But if the internet had been around, they're like, oh no, there are people who are into the weird stuff you're into too. Like it's a thing, but because people didn't have the internet, like there's so many like lonely people over human history who didn't quite fit in because they were into some kind of, unusual things, unorthodox things, and there was no one else in their hometown that was into it, so they must have lived lonely, sad lives. But the internet could have fixed it, maybe. I don't know.
Here's a good thought experiment. How many tragedies would have been prevented were the internet around?
Wow.
And how many tragedies would have been exacerbated were the internet around?
Yeah, Romeo and Juliet, if like they like could tag each other on social media and then like their parents would see, and that whole thing. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, the second comment under Romeo and Juliet when it was first posted would be lame, gay. I mean, the first would be first. We all know that. So
first.
This joke was funny in 2011. It wasn't. It wasn't. Nido King and Nido Queen, eh? So
yeah.
Do you imagine them being about 4 foot, or do you imagine them being about 20 foot, or something totally different?
I like to picture them being at least 10 feet tall, just based on the character designs, and especially in Nido King. Nido Queen still has like those kind of friendly eyes. Like, I want to have a Nido Queen, and I do not want to have a Nido King. He's just terrifying. He looks like a kaiju, like you said. Like, I want to watch him fight something, but I don't want to have him in my pocket. Scary.
Friendly eyes. Nido King is awesome. It's never been a Pokemon, Nido Queen or Nido King. Neither of them have been a Pokemon that I like ever personally attached to.
I respect that. And in the Pokemonopoly board game I had growing up, they were Boardwalk and Park Place, like the two most valuable properties were Nido Queen and Nido King. So like I always thought of them as very like prestigious, very royal types of Pokemon based on their placement in the Monopoly game.
That's amazing. I bought that Pokemon Monopoly game a few years ago at a bazaar downtown in Syracuse from a friend of mine, and it stung a little because I'm like, this motherfucker would have just gave this to me if we were hanging out at his house and I saw it. But I'm not going to just ask him to give it to me when he's down here trying to make some money. Here's your money. I also bought Pokemon Yahtzee that day.
Oh, cool. I haven't played that.
Yeah,
Is that the one you roll the dice?
Yeah, totally. I have a dice collection, so I basically bought it for the
cool.
dice.
It is cool to have like little trinkets, like the little pewter figures that come with the Monopoly game and stuff like that. It's kind of cool.
You know what? I don't think the pewter figures are in mine. Who were they? Were they Pokemon?
You got ripped off. Yeah, there was Poliwhirl, Pikachu. I want to say Charmander.
That son of a bitch! I swear to God, Mark, if you're listening, you better give me those fucking pewter figures. I paid like $4 for that.
And you would have just given it to him, Mark. Come on.
You know what's funny is you could probably melt down the pewter and get more than $4.
Yeah, that is potentially true.
You fucking prick.
Okay. So it's the 3 starters: Pikachu, Eevee, and Jigglypuff.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And now I'm starting to feel crazy. I feel like mine was an older version than the one I just looked up. Like, I feel like mine had Poliwhirl because that's always been one of my favorite Pokemon.
Poliwhirl is cool. He's one of those, like, forgotten Pokemon that was everywhere in the early days.
Yeah, I had him inside. Like, I had a bouncy ball with him inside of it when I was a kid.
It's really
Poliwhirl's
interesting.
Great.
Like, the promotional, like, whoever was in charge of promotional material, like, really liked Poliwhirl because he's not a big deal in the games, like, at all. Like, don't get me wrong, Poliwrath actually I think is actually good competitively, or was at one point at least, but like,
true.
That's so crazy. Like, Poliwhirl was everywhere when like Poliwhirl is iconic to me of the early days of Pokemon.
And Pokemon Adventures manga, like, that's Red's like main Pokemon. That's like his starter until he meets Pikachu, pretty much.
Yeah, that was his first Pokemon. Yeah, he got Bulbasaur next, right? And then he gets Pikachu.
Yeah, it's one and then the other. I'm not sure exactly which. And I don't remember. I do think that in my Pokemon team, I'd want to have a Poliwhirl. I don't remember if it's in our Cerulean City episode if I brought that up, but I do really love Poliwhirl.
Have you ever seen that early development art of Poliwrath when he has the crown?
No.
Yeah, and
that sounds cool.
There's like a very, very early drawing of Poliwrath, but he has like a little crown, and it's right around the time there was also like this like It looked like a boxing beetle or something that they drew. Oh, I love those early production.
Yeah, the really early capsule monsters art. Oh yeah, I just pulled up that Polyrath picture. That's really cool. Oh, that's really neat.
Man, see, if the internet wasn't around, you would have just shot up a school right there. But thanks to the internet.
Oh God. I do feel very satisfied though, and I feel very satisfied most days.
You're a teacher. I can't say that.
No, yeah, I know it's a little bit messed up, but hey, it's all right. We've been through the training. We know how to react in a situation like that. So, yeah.
Holy shit, I'm so uncomfortable now.
It's all good. Hey, I've got a little piece of trivia for you. This could be a quiz, I guess, if we wanted it to. But I know that you are really attached to Farfetch'd, right?
I love Farfetch'd, yes.
Yes, and Farfetch'd has an apostrophe in its name. Is that correct?
It does.
I'm doing this like it's an interrogation or a lie detector test or something. But
to the best of my knowledge, yes.
There are a total of 9 Pokemon that have non-alphabetical characters in their name, including Nidoran male, Nidoran female, Farfetch'd. Can you name the other 6?
Does Missing No count?
No.
Okay, because Missing No has a period in its name, so that'd make 10.
That's true. That's a good point.
Okay, can I name the other 6? They have
yes, you can.
A non-letter in their name. Porygon Z. Is that right?
Because it has a hyphen, correct.
I was just thinking Z. No, I forgot Z was a letter.
Z's a letter.
I mean, Y is only a letter sometimes, right? You're the teacher.
It's only a vowel sometimes.
I know.
Oh, goodness.
Hey, it is a number or an integer sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Any letter could be an integer.
It's probably the second most common integer.
Yeah,
anyway,
probably.
I would say with confidence, it's the second most common integer.
If you mean variable, then I think you're right.
Variable. Fuck you. You're the teacher. You can't.
I do teach Algebra 1. I can go into detail about this, but
you can't flunk me.
All right, so you've got a total of 4. You came up with one of them. I gave you 3 of them.
I'm not talking to you anymore. I was trying to sound smart. I was using words like integer and verbatim.
You were doing great, honestly. Most adults don't remember any of their vocab. You've still got some. I'm impressed. And you were even thinking of the common, like how common each, X is obviously the most frequently used, and Y is probably the second most. But yeah, so you've got a total of 4 of the 9 so far.
Okay.
And you came up with Missing No, which isn't even on the list, so that might be a bonus point.
Okay. Oh wait, is the second stage of Porygon 2?
Yep.
Okay,
that's another one.
Porygon 2.
Good job.
Porygon Z. So I only have 4 more now. Holy crap. What Pokemon is a hyphen? Oh, is it Tapu Koko or whatever?
No,
those are just different words. Okay.
I think that's just 2 words, yeah.
I'm going to feel so stupid when I figure this out.
It is one of the very first Pokemon in the anime that you see.
In the anime? Well, I know you see a Gengar, a Nidoran, a Spearow, a Voltorb, a Dodrio, or a Doduo.
I'm totally right along with you in that first episode. That's really funny.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm like literally going through the episode in my head.
Yeah. It's in the first episode. I think it might be at the end of the episode, though.
I'm going to feel so stupid. Oh, Ho-Oh.
Yeah.
There you go.
Nice. All right, then there's 3 more.
3 more.
2 of them have periods in the name.
Mr. Mime.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I got 2 more, and one of them has a period.
Yep.
Holy
sort of
crap.
similar to Mr. Mime.
Dr. Mime. The GameStop giveaway.
It is kind of like that, where it's like a name thing. Like an abbreviation meaning a part of a name type of deal.
Huh. Why don't I remember that?
I don't think there's any Doctor Pokemon.
I'm going to feel really dumb when it comes out. What is it?
This is fun. I like knowing the answers.
You would be a teacher.
I know. I giggle at knowing things that you don't, and
some
just holding
sick
the
sort of
information.
pleasure out of this.
I do. It's great. Thank you. It's very similar to Mr. Mime.
Wow, what is it? I don't know. What give me a hint for the other one.
Okay, the other one, I would have almost considered this a letter, but it has 2 E's with accent marks on them.
2 of them.
So I guess technically that's a non-alphabetical character.
Okay, I give up.
Okay, Mime Jr.
Oh my god.
I know, right? And then Flabebe.
Okay, that I don't count.
Flabebe. Yeah, that one I was like, I could leave that off the list. But yeah, I thought the Mr. Mime and Mime Jr. thing was pretty funny.
Mime Jr. I knew it was gonna be so obvious when I figured it out.
You did a great job, though. I'm very impressed. That was awesome. Put on the spot. I didn't give you a warning about that or anything.
That was fun. I liked that.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about a lot of the influences, especially the influences in the animal kingdom that went into the creation of this Pokemon. We haven't really talked about it, but it's been implied, I guess, just through our discussion of its relation to like rabbits and gerbils and hamsters and guinea pigs, that the ground type of this Pokemon probably comes from the fact that it burrows. The Pokedex talks about Nidoqueen protecting the burrows, and we've covered a lot of the inspirations, but there's one question that remains unanswered. Why the poison type? Where does the poison type come from? Rhinos are not poison. Mice are not poison. I mean, you can get bit by one and get a pretty nasty infection, but I feel like that's not where this is coming from. Baragon, the kaiju that a lot of people compare Nidoking to, that's not poison. Synapsids aren't really poison from our knowledge. They might be, I guess, but like porcupines they don't poison people with their quills. Where does this poison idea come from? And it could be as simple as just like, okay, well, what if a porcupine stung somebody with his quills? That's not a big leap to make for a Pokemon. But I feel like if that was all it was, the Pokemon would be more obviously porcupine, you know? I felt like there had to be something there, and I think there is.
Ooh.
First, there's 2 major areas of influence that I think this comes from. So first, let's go with I can't think of the words I'm trying to think of today, but let's go with the one that's, I don't know. Let's go with this one. We're going to call it this one. Have you ever heard of the jackalope?
Yes.
I mean, I love jackalopes. They're horned rabbits. They're rabbits with horns. Now that says nothing about the poison type, but let's ruminate on that for a little bit.
Sure. That's really interesting.
Where does a rabbit with a horn come from? I feel like you can't ignore the jackalope as an obvious influence for combining the rhinoceros and the rabbit.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that at all, but it really does make sense.
Right? Do you remember America's Funniest People?
No.
Do you remember America's Funniest Home Videos?
Yeah, that show's
Bob Saget?
great.
There was another one with the other guy from Full House, Uncle Joey, I think, the one who made all the funny voices, like, you gotta cut it out, that guy.
Right, yeah.
He hosted it, and there were these little shorts of a jackalope that would just run around and fuck with people. Like, most of the videos were just, like, the same thing as America's Funniest Home Videos, except with Uncle Joey doing the narration instead of Bob Saget.
Wow. That's really weird.
There'd be these little ones with a jackalope that they would stop motion animate running around like fucking with the mailman or fucking with the golfers or whatever. And that just always has stuck out as this foggy memory in my youth that I'm probably never going to get another chance to talk about it on the podcast again. So I had to throw it in here now.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Huh. I like the jackalope as an inspiration. I think that does make sense. That's maybe where they started from, and they're like, well, obviously we don't want it to just look like a jackalope. We want to kind of evolve that idea of mixing those 2 animals together, and having a rabbit that's more offensive is kind of cool.
Also, if you look into the origins of the folkloric creature itself, it's been speculated that it may because jackalopes pop up all over the world, like not just in one place. They are, I think, mostly an American creature, but there have been similar creatures all over the place, even in like there's an Arab creature called, I wrote it down, the Al-Miraj, that's like a bunny with a unicorn horn, so even more like a Nidoran. And It looks cute and harmless, but it actually kills people and animals with its horns. And there's this mythic Bavarian creature called the Wolpertinger. And it's basically like a jackalope, but it has fangs and wings. Hey, that'd be a cool mega evolution, right?
Yeah, it would.
But
even more kaiju-like.
It's speculated that one of the origins for this myth might have been the cottontail papillomavirus, which is the cutest sounding, horrible, most sounding disease ever. It's like the human papillomavirus, but it's the cottontail papillomavirus.
Oh, that's sad.
And what it does is it actually causes these big growths to form, usually somewhere in their head, like most often out of their mouth, but they like curve up a lot of times, or it will just come from some point in their head, and like a lot of times it would look like horns. And because of this, it's speculated, at least because of this, like jackalopes were actually taxonomically listed as like real creatures for a long time. Because people in the Old West were probably just seeing these rabbits with what looked like horns on their heads, but were really a disease that was starving them and killing them.
Just crazy tumor things. That's crazy. Wow.
So it's not poison, but I think a disease is close enough to poison to still make this kind of remarkable, you know?
Yeah. And maybe that is kind of it. They're like, let's take the cryptozoological animal of a jackalope and kind of mix it with the case of mistaken identity that was its origin, and kind of infuse that disease with the creature's powers. That's really interesting. Huh.
Right?
I like that idea a lot. That's a cool fan theory.
But that's not all. We're going to leave you with one more, which is probably the coolest. Well, I don't know. The jackalope's pretty cool.
The jackalope one is awesome.
So, Okunoshima Island was the site of this secret chemical weapon factory for Japan in World War II, where they basically developed different poisonous gases and tested them on rabbits. And after the bombing of Hiroshima and the ending of the war, the factory was abandoned. Basically, the entire island was just abandoned and left there, as were the rabbits that were there to be tested on. Cut to modern day, it's earned the nickname Rabbit Island, or Usagi Jima, which sounds like Usagi Yojimbo, the rabbit samurai. And it is overrun with rabbits. The island is just flooded with rabbits, and none of them are afraid of man, and they'll just let you pet them. Super friendly.
Wow.
And there's a museum there about poison gas that like educates you, and like I don't know, it's super interesting, and I think there's no denying that tying of poison gas to rabbits in Japanese culture has to have something to do with it.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and it kind of reminds me of like of Godzilla, like a kind of Monster Island kind of thing, and tying in with the origin of Godzilla, like kaiju being created by mankind's weapons interfering with nature, and that creating like a more powerful creature.
Wow,
that's really interesting. Yeah, that's really cool.
Now
that's
I wonder, do you think then it's relevant that their main habitat seems to be to the west of Viridian City, and Viridian City's gym leader was Giovanni, whose number one main Pokemon was the Nidoking? So is it, with what you said about like mankind's technology poisoning them, or that interacting with them and creating a kaiju like Godzilla, and there obviously are similarities to be drawn between Nidoking and Nidoqueen and Baragon, one of Godzilla's either friends or enemies, depending on what movie you're watching.
Sure.
Maybe then is there something to do with the fact that Giovanni is the gym leader of Viridian City, which is right near their main habitat, and his main Pokemon is the Nidoking?
I definitely think that there are certain kind of parallels between the like power combining with nature and corruption, that kind of match between that origin of like Nidoking with Giovanni. I think that there's something really powerful there, something really appealing as well. Like that's kind of one of the reasons I always liked the Team Rocket Pokemon cards and the Dark Pokemon cards, was that kind of evil, like kind of like angry revenge kind of angle. I think that's a really fascinating story piece right there. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And kind of like the sort of corruption that mankind tends to have on nature, and the unintentional side effects that can have. And usually it's not as awesome as creating, kaiju. Usually it's
usually it's not awesome at all.
Right, usually it's just downright awful. but I like the fictional version of that to kind of be more uplifting and make it seem like it's more okay.
I mean, even in Godzilla, the fiction, I mean, eventually he becomes a hero and starts protecting Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. If they all kept the same tone as the original, Gojira, it would not be a very beloved franchise, I think. It's just too sad. It's just too much. Yeah. Ugh.
Hey, it'd still be better than Saw.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. At least there's something to be learned from it, from, having that horrifying impact be displayed. It's like, wow, I can learn a message from this. It has a powerful message. But then this, I don't know, like the Nidoran family is just kind of cute, nice, fun little Pokemon that you can find early on in the game and gives you kind of that cool, connection to poison. I don't know, and that gets kind of into poison type itself. Is that all about mankind's corruption of nature and pollution? And I mean, it's not entirely like that. Of course, some animals naturally have poison as a defense mechanism, but I don't think that rabbits or rhinos should have that.
Hey, the platypus is a poisonous mammal, or is it? I don't even know. I can never get my finger on that platypus.
Yeah, it's a mammal. It's a weird mammal, but yeah, you're right. That's true.
Fascinating. Hey,
yeah.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming back again, man. Thank you for fulfilling my wishes for a Nidoran episode.
You're welcome. Thank you for having those wishes. I love being on the kind of different types of Silph radio episodes. Like doing one about Cerulean City was really cool. Like the MMO one, of course, was really cool. But like zooming in on the smaller pieces is really fascinating. Just one city, just one family type of Pokemon. Like that's really cool. That was fun.
I guarantee.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. You were not expecting what you got when you jumped into this episode, and I love that. Like I wasn't expecting it, so I call bullshit if you say you were.
I don't say that, so please don't.
Don't.
No, that was a fun one. Thanks for having me on, man.
And our internet has chosen this time to start being a dick, so I guess we'll wrap things up. Andrew, would you like to tell the listeners where they can find your awesome podcast and what they should expect to find there when they get there?
Certainly. It is called Amusement Sparks. That's amusement parks with an S in between because sparks, because of imagination. It's a theme park design show. I guess picks a topic and then we just brainstorm a theme park based on that. So the new season starts soon. By the time that this... I bet that it won't have started yet. Oh my gosh, that was long-winded. Season 3 will start on November 6th, by the way. But, Nathan K. himself is going to be on a Nickelodeon theme park episode on November 27th. And the last episode that you and Craig were both on, our Gotham Batman's World episode, is going up on YouTube tonight. So definitely by the time this airs, it'll be on YouTube. Just look up Gotham Batman's World and it should come up. But yeah, I'm adding a lot of video and photos to kind of go with what we're talking about as we're describing this theme park and designing the theme park. So yeah, I obviously love podcasting with you. This is our 5th collaboration. It's very exciting.
It's super cool. Go check it out. Like, even if you've already listened to the episodes, we can't say it enough. Like, this stuff helps us a lot. So go subscribe to his YouTube. If you liked the episode, you don't have to watch it again on YouTube. Just go click like. But I like what he's doing with the videos. It's cool. So it's worth a look if you're curious. Go subscribe to his YouTube and check out the podcast if you haven't heard it yet. Like, it's great. The episode me and Craig did was a lot of fun, but the other episodes are a lot of fun too. I mean, if you like Pokemon and you like Batman, there's no way you're not going to like a few of the other topics that they've done. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the Nickelodeon episode me and you did that's going to be out in the next season. So,
yeah, man, me too. Cool. Thank you so much, dude. Always a pleasure.
The fucking internet hates us tonight. I can barely hear what you're saying. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to close out the podcast. Dude, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us again. I really look forward to seeing what the next topic we'll be doing is. You can pick next time. And I really look forward to hearing the next episode of Amusement Sparks. So, hey, have a good night, man.
Thank you so much. It's always a good time, dude. See ya.
I can't even hear you. I can't even hear you. When the listener hears this episode, they'll hear you talking and they'll be like, "Why isn't he?" But on my end, it's all silence. So I'm just gonna assume you said something really cool, and I'm gonna sign the episode out and text you to make sure I didn't just hang up on you. Have a great night, my friend. Have a great night, my listeners. Look us up on Facebook, Twitter. We're at Fairpoint Pod. We're on Reddit r/Silph Radio. Join the conversation and come be a part of the podcast. Have a great week, guys. Have a great week, Andrew. You still there?
Peace. Yeah, I'm still here.
Kinda. I can barely hear you. You're there, though.
Yeah, something is weird. Cool. Have a good one, dude.
Thanks, dude.
All right, bye.